Okay, here we go. Evan, if you could smash that phone in your face, that'd be great. Yeah, good. Blast in the eye. I think the first study goal that I really want to talk about today is number 21. I'd like you to know the different types of logging practice before we can talk about how to do logging sustainably in number 22. So if you had all of these already drawn, I could help you understand what the drawings are supposed to show. And then I want to talk about what's good and what's bad about these different types of logging. Am I forgetting anything? Were we supposed to do something before jumping into this? Okay. Clear cutting. You'll write the most about this one. Clear cutting is like it sounds. You take everything down. You cut down the whole, you cut the forest clear. You clear the forest. A key point that you probably want to put at the top, above all of these, is that a forest is a mixture of things. There's different species, there's dead stuff, there's live stuff, there's babies, there's old, there's weird species you don't need. Forests have bushes and brambles and vines and dead sticks leaning against live sticks. Do you all know that old growth forest is not the same thing as old trees? Did we already talk about this? It was a warm-up a couple days ago. In clear cutting, you cut down everything. Of course, you're only going to keep the good, straight sticks of the chosen species that you're trying to log. Doug fir, yellow pine, whatever. But almost everything you cut down is stuff that was in the way. Dead stuff in the way. Baby trees that aren't good enough to make into make into lumber, but they were in the way. Other tree species that are just a hassle, so you get rid of them. Yeah, bro.
Is it like easier to clear cut than like the other kinds? Like that's like the most like efficient way to just cut down trees?
And it seems really wasteful to cut all that stuff down, but we gotta be really clear, that's way more efficient, way cheaper, and a big thing that you must have in your notes, it's also safer. Clear cut.
What makes it safer?
That trees are scary as F. Like trees are big and they're heavy and they're often connected to each other. Raise your hand if you've been in a forest, like real thick, like complicated forest. You know, like when we're walking at the ground, we're usually looking at some trail or looking at our phones or looking at the person's butt in front of us or whatever. But we're not usually looking up. If you look up in a forest, you notice that a lot of those sticks, as they get higher, will lean against each other, will have branches that are tangled in each other. I've walked through a trail and seen a tree suspended by two other trees. Like a rugby goalpost. It was like, whoop. Like it had fallen, snapped, leveled out, and it was just sitting in the crooks like this. It was perfectly balanced. It was like a perfect H. This is what makes it dangerous. It's not a clean floor like this. The forest floor has big, slippery, rotting things. Has tangled, matted, hard to see, fall through, break your knee things. Almost every forest on the planet occurs on slopes, not on flat ground. So sometimes it's sketchy steep. Like if you roll with your chainsaw running, pieces of you will land. So the simplest, safest thing is to have a big machine that cuts everything out in the front. Most of that stuff just gets ground into chips, and every now and then you find a good tree and you put it into the other machine that goes and it'll strip all the branches off. Then it'll go and take all the bark off it, and then just put the log on a truck that's driving all nearby it. You have 3 machines that just drive next to each other, 3 operators, nobody on the ground, no chainsaws. Clear cutting. Kill everything. The most efficient, cheapest, safest way to get your targeted material because it's cheaper and it's safer. I gotta be let's be real here. That's almost all the planet's logging. That's about 90% of the Earth's logging. There's almost no exception. All this other stuff is like interesting to talk about, but they're not really alternatives. Like everybody could ride a bike, but pretty much we all drive to school. And ecologically speaking, this is pretty horrible. It's horrible because number one, succession is really slow. This is like a fire. You got rid of everything. So like, where's your seed gonna come from? Where's the wind protection gonna come from? It takes a long time to recover, number one. Number two, you've removed all habitat. So everything that used to live in the forest is gone now. If you're targeting the pine trees, you cut down all the oak trees, so all the stuff that lives in oak trees is screwed, and they don't have anything to do with pine trees. This is a total habitat loss. And problem number 3, this is a global leading cause of erosion and sediment pollution. Because that dirt has nothing to stop the wind, nothing to keep the rain from washing it away. That dirt is doomed. That dirt has no more anchor. Yeah?
Erosion and sediment what?
Pollution. Like dust in the air. And it's like, y'all seen that meme with the 2 ladies that are screaming from Desperate Housewives against the weird white cat? Right, you know what I'm talking about? It's like,
You can just play it.
kill all the habitat, horrible erosion, no succession. And then the cat is like, cheaper and safer.
Okay,
And so you got like those 2 angry women, and then you got like the cat going like, and it's really like the stupidest debate in the history of environmental science, because like they're both true, and you can't have your cake and eat it too, and like it's just like, yep, that's the reality. Slow to recover, total habitat loss, primary cause of erosion, sediment pollution. The dirt is due, the soil loss. But you know, it's more efficient, it's cheaper, it's safer. Like nobody wants to kill a logger. Like you're not gonna make that argument. So that's almost all of it. That's almost all the logging. Then there's a couple of other ideas. Please look up. In shelterwood cutting, you're just getting rid of the sick and the dead and the tangled. So this is like grooming the forest. If I owned a forest, and I wanted the forest to be even nicer, I would do some shelter wood cutting, which is just to get rid of the wood that's less premium. The sick, the tangled, the dead logs. You know, it's a nice way to get some firewood, but basically you're just improving the forest. It's not really logging. You don't get much out of that. Who wants tangled, sick, dead trees? That's usually not valuable. So pretty much nobody does that. It doesn't really count as forestry. It's like the opposite of this. In seed tree cutting, it's a clear cut where you leave a couple big mamas for seeds. So it sort of accelerates the recovery. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, oh, this forest took forever to cut. All I wanted was the redwoods, so I'm going to leave the big mama redwoods to make more redwoods. So you leave the moms to start a tree farm. Yeah.
Do trees have like a similar genetic risk like animals?
Yeah. So I would assume that there's probably some people who could give you numbers on that, like how many trees per mile is adequate and is optimal and suboptimal. I would point out that many trees have wind-borne pollen. So by leaving a few redwoods, you're probably still receiving genes from wherever the wind comes. But yeah, it's a reasonable consideration. Now selective cutting is just what all the hippies want. I will blind you with my laser. And my left hand doesn't work, so I'll probably blind somebody else.
Still see it.
Yeah, you're covered. You're good. Sophia, you're good. Selective cutting is what all the hippies want. If you only sell like 5% of the trees, why don't you just cut out those 5%? And yeah, I mean, and by the way, it's sketchy. It's not just expensive, it is friggin' horrifying.
Yeah,
See, this is where, like, life experience, little bunnies. Like, when you get out into the forest and you gotta wield a big-ass chainsaw and that tree starts to go snap, crackle, pop and starts to fall, that is a horrifying moment. Because they don't go like down into the dust. In a packed forest, they go bing, 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 and the things go snap, 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 and like branches are flying and you're the dumbass holding a chainsaw. Right at the base of the tree. And you can run, but now you're running with a chainsaw with stuff going ping, ping, ping. So it's really, really sketchy. Like, I'm pretty good at felling trees. I was trained by an educated arborist. I have a lot of practice. I do a lot of chainsaw work. My summer job in the Sierras, I'm the lumberjack for the Rangers in Tuolumne Meadows. What do you call that? When
Weird flex, but okay.
flex, yeah, weird flex, yeah. Life and memes, this is fun. And I feel really confident with saws and like, yeah, I don't want to flex, but when they fall, it's scary. It's really scary. And once it's down, what are you going to do? Be like, bro, you take the other end, let's walk this thing out?
Yes.
Like, how are you going to drive through the forest to grab that?
cut more trees down.
Right. And now that we're cutting more trees down, why stop here? And so there's really no way, like, everybody imagines that, like, 3-finger clawed thing that's impossible to operate to grab the stuffed animals at the fair or whatever.
Claw machine?
Claw machine?
I wanna.
Last Friday, I played it and I won it 5 times.
Okay, so claw specialist over here might think that, oh, I got this. And yeah, but selective, like with a chopper, like there's just like no way to get one stick.
Have you seen?
Like lumber's not that valuable. You're competing against clear cutters.
There's this really satisfying video of like a helicopter with a giant chainsaw attached to the bottom, and it's just flying along the edge of this forest, like cutting it into like a straight, or not even forest, like this
I've
row
not
of
seen that.
trees. Oh my god!
I can't wait to see that.
Terrifying.
Airplanes.
That sounds
So
beautiful.
cool.
Okay.
Let's watch right now.
No. My point is this. My point is this. In our dreams, we wish that selective cutting were viable because it would solve all these problems. They all go away. If you could just cherry pick the trees, like honestly, there's little baby trees that are going to grow next year, so it's better for the loggers. Like everybody wins. Selective cutting is awesome but no.
No one dies while doing it.
I mean, it would be sweet. It would be sweet, but it's impossibly expensive, ridiculously inefficient, and horribly unsafe. It's not going to happen. It's a non sequitur. It would give you the same trees per mile more often. So it's the right way to manage a farm. Like if you could do that, you would get more stuff from the forest. It's more money, theoretically. But the getting the tree part doesn't work. Thinning, I will describe in greater length later, but basically you get rid of all the riffraff. Is cleaning up a forest. Is getting all the junk and the dead stuff and the sticks and the brush and the mangled, twisted baby trees and like just cleaning up the forest. This is what someone has famously described as raking the forest floor on national television last year. Yeah.
How's it different from shelterwood cutting? The drawings look like nearly the same.
Yeah, sorry, my drawings suck.
They all look the same.
But like the concept's too big.
Yeah, I got you. So in thinning, you remove much more material. In thinning, you just leave the big ass trees. So you take a lot of living small trees, and you target some species maybe, you kind of get rid of some stuff that you didn't want in your forest.
So it's an intense grooming.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, you said you were grooming in shelterwood. So wouldn't it just be like a more intensified version?
More intensive grooming, yeah. It's like a buzz cut.
I thought that's what clear cutting was. Oh my god, these are all the same.
Okay, it's patterned buzz cutting. Anyway. It's buzz cutting with a guide. The important thing, I don't want to give this all away now because it comes better later. I think it's going to fall on Monday or Tuesday now. But thinning is to replace the activity of wildfire. Like thinning returns more nutrients to the ground, and it just like it sounds, it thins out the forest, like thinning out the herd. It's more aggressive forest grooming. And strip cutting is probably the best way to do clear cuts. It's like smart clear cutting. You still clear cut, as in cutting everything down. It's still efficient and it's cheap and it's safe. But please look up. Do you remember when we did the strawberry corn thing?
Yeah.
Now imagine clear cut, leave the trees, clear cut, leave the trees, clear cut, leave the trees. All three clear cut problems are kind of solved. Because when you're clear cutting, a lot of the critters can go find habitat in the trees. And where a clear cut would be slow to recover, these ones are going to sprout faster because they're getting seeds from these neighboring trees. And where a clear cut might have had horrible erosion, this clear cut is protected from the wind and has some trees to capture the soil before it washes away. So strip cutting is clear cutting in strips, like a checkerboard. And it sort of addresses some of the problems. Then when this is like, like halfway to harvest age, then we clear cut these strips. So by the time you can cut these again, these are halfway to adult again. So instead of clear cut every 40, you get a patterned cut every 15 and then 15 later. So they recover faster. Yeah?
What's the downside?
You know, it's like a little bit more organization, it's a little bit less efficient, but it kind of spreads out the revenue. So most people, if it's like a managed clear cut, like they know they're going to keep that land for a long time, then they'll do strip cutting now. The only places that we clear cut is when you like have to take all the trees and then get out, like using federal land or whatever.
So
Just
like,
have a temporary
if
access.
they're like if someone's planning on like developing on land or something, they would clear cut
Usually.
and then like, yeah.
Or if it's illegal, or if it's like at the end of a land lease, or if you're about to lose your logging rights. Okay. Anybody want to talk about these? Because I want to move on. Now, if we could go to number 22. The idea of sustainable forestry is really, it's a branding battle. It's like, are electrical cars sustainable? Not as sustainable as walking. Maybe more sustainable than another car. In operation only? What about in production? What about in life cycle? So, you know, same thing. Sustainable forestry is like, well, at least it's better than that. Some of the elements in sustainable forestry are, you gotta know this, protecting water, like leaving a strip of trees so that all the dirt doesn't flood into the river. That's a really big deal in NorCal. So we'll let you clear cut, but only 100 feet away from the river. For the last 100 feet next to the river, you gotta leave some forest so you don't dump all that mud into the river. So protecting rivers for sustainable forestry. Reseeding programs. Like if you're gonna cut stuff down, you should probably put some seeds in so that it recovers faster to accelerate the recovery. And you know, for sustainable forestry, you got to identify the critical habitat. Like, hey, this area might have a couple of sticks, but that's where the owls nest, let's protect that. So in sustainable forestry, you'll often see these weird little blotches and corridors that are still vegetated to protect the river, to protect the migratory route, to protect the breeding site. Sustainable forestry is usually a clear cut with a handshake. All right, I'll protect the river. Or okay, the owls can stay. But you take those three big problems and then you try to solve them and you get to call yourself sustainable forestry. Yeah.
So it's like strip cutting, but instead of preserving the trees, you're preserving the wildlife?
Yeah. This is kind of like patterned strip cutting. It's prioritizing your strip cut. There's this other thing that I find kind of slippery to discuss. Some of you know a lot of ecology, and some of you really care about environmental science, so this last conversation is probably just for you. If you're just trying to survive the AP test, or you're just trying to get through this period until tomorrow, you can probably tune out for a minute. This is number 22. This debate comes up about whether it's sustainable to farm trees. Silviculture, tree farming, is when you monoculture one tree species. And I have to be really clear about something. Yes, tree farming is more sustainable than logging old growth forest, but no, it's not a perfect answer. Tree farms are a monoculture. And for number 22, I would like everyone to write this down. Tree farm equals monoculture equals pest problems, low habitat value, nutrient deficiencies. You know, that's the same as if you were just growing corn. Like if all you grow is corn, you're going to run out of the corn nutrients, you're going to get a lot of corn bugs, and not many things like to live in corn. So like if you replace your corn with like 50,000 acres of blue spruce, you're going to get that one pest that only eats blue spruce, and you're going to run out of all the blue spruce nutrients. And the only thing that wants to live there is those things that eat the blue spruce or that live in blue spruce, and that's it. So tree farm is still monoculture. That's not a good replacement for old growth forest. Old growth forest is complex, it's diverse, and a tree farm doesn't work like that. Kind of a wonky debate. Like you kind of got to be an ecology nerd to realize why old growth forest is better. But I can tell you a quick little story. I went to Manaus in Brazil for about 2 weeks. And Manaus is like the geographical center of the Brazilian Amazon basin. It's where the Rio Negro and the Amazon River meet. Chloe Van Zandt, smash the phone against your face until the little pieces of glass go into your eyes. Evan can help you. That would be awesome. I'll tell you right now, you did really, really badly. Really, really badly. Horribly. You got a 0. Didn't even write your name right.
So mean.
Now whatever you get is going to make you feel better. But it'll be later when you find out. Okay. I went to Manaus, and I have to say that for me, that kind of fulfilled like a lifetime dream. Because growing up in Argentina, I heard about my grandparents and other people I knew who had traveled north to Brazil and loved all the diversity and saw all the fish. And then when I came to the US, I used to keep and breed all these cool fish from the Amazon River, and I know about the water quality, and I know about the diversity. And then like I would study forest ecology and stuff, and I heard all these amazing things that happen in the Amazon basin, so I was so excited to go. And when I landed in Manaus, it's like a huge city. It's like an industrial center. There are like motorcycle factories and big airports and like old mission era buildings and stuff. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get out of Manaus. I'm going to try to go like a couple hours up the river, try to find some relatively remote little community. So I went to a pretty remote little community. I see it on a little island. I think it was called Santa Maria something or other. And they just had like a little Portuguese mission era church complex and like a couple little eco lodges. And then I was like, all right, well, we're going to go deep now. And I got in like a little wooden rowboat that had like a crappy little outboard. And we like went way out. I was like super bored and I'd go to sleep. And I'd wake up and still be like hours up the river. And I was like, all right, here I am. I'm deep in the forest. And I kind of knew what I was looking for, and I wanted to find things. And everything I could see all the way to the horizon, as deep as I could get in the Amazon, was all secondary growth. It was probably logged multiple times before I ever saw it, like clear cut and then clear cut and then clear cut and then clear cut. I saw a whole bunch of eucalyptus, like an invasive non-native tree. I saw some cool Amazon stuff, but no native forest. Think about it. If I can get there, people have already been there. If I can get there as an American tourist, modern Brazilians are probably pretty well set up there, which means older native Brazilians have probably lost that land for a long time now. If there was already impacts from the mission era, then there's at least 300 years of extraction that's already happened. And here's the point I need to make in number 22 before I move on. Tertiary succession is slow. This is like a little throwback to a previous unit. Once you lose total biodiversity, some species don't come back right away. We know in Santa Barbara that abalone grow really slow, so even though we have abalone, we won't have historic levels of abalone for thousands of years. Natives in Brazil ate all sorts of stuff. The Spaniards ate all sorts of stuff. The modern Brazilian economy chews through all sorts of stuff. And then here's me as a tourist thinking I'm going to see virgin rainforest? Like, what even is that? And by the way, you know the only reason I want to see that? So that I can get something out of that and impact it myself. What makes me really excited about finding a place that nobody else has fished is that I can kill the fish. So for number 22, I gotta tell you, I'm sorry, this is kind of esoteric, and I know a lot of you are going to sleep, so I'll switch subjects here, but I don't think we can do sustainable forestry very much. I think it's kind of a practical unicorn. I don't think it's likely to happen. Please go to study goal number 20, whatever, the next one, 23. I want to talk about Bass Lake now. Settle down, God. Horrible, by the way. Who likes Bass Lake?
Honestly.
It's all hot.
Oh, it's freaking gorgeous.
It's like the worst. You're just saying that because
Yeah, in the best of way.
Study goal number 23 says, will somebody please shut Sadie up? It says, where and how much deforestation? What are the trends? You got that? We know the main reasons that we cut down stuff, firewood, then for clearing land for farms. So the direct deforestation is pretty easy. But I want to talk about indirect deforestation. Could somebody please define that before I move on?
The death of trees from pollution and disease.
Yeah, but more generally.
Not
accidental
Right. The death of forest by doing something that's not supposed to be killing the forest. It's just like incidental. So you could say it's an accident, or you could say it's just not the goal. So like it's not an accident that we cause climate change. We just don't care enough. So that's not an accident. That's just incidental. It's like, well, you know, I break some eggs, make an omelet. You should know if you don't have this, acid rain, air pollution, low altitude ozone, drought, climate change. We divert water. So that's indirect deforestation. But it just so happens that you live in a place that gets to see how climate change kills forest. How many of you know some grumpy old guy, or maybe even a grumpy young guy, who rejects climate change? Now here's the beautiful thing. Proof is in the pudding, there's no better explanation. Go ahead, smart guy, riddle me this. I've got a classic, simple, elegant, tangible, visible, personal example of how climate change indirectly causes deforestation. And a lot of you have seen it. Raise your hand if Mammoth Lakes. Colorado? Anywhere with mountains, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, Bass Lake, Southern Sierras, Mariposa, parts of NorCal, Sonora, Sonoma, Winery Country, Napa. So how many of you raised your hand for at least one of those? Okay, so that's a pretty good number. You've all seen this. Please look up. The western United States and the mountainous United States is experiencing rapid indirect deforestation. This is, by all visible evidence, the most extreme and most rapid deforestation in the history of the US, much faster than logging. Like when people came out west and they cut down all the redwoods in Yosemite and stuff, this is way bigger than that period. Forest is being lost by the acres, with very few gaps in the damage in some areas. In other places, it's a little bit more spotty. This is documented very clearly. We have numbers of trees, we have percentages of trees, we have species of trees, elevations of trees. People keep track of this. You can look it up all over the internet, and you can just go walk through the forest. And people say, well, is it the drought? Is it the climate change? Is it the beetles? And the cool thing is, it's a really simple explanation that includes all of those. And for number 23, I kind of need you to know this, because it's a way that you can get into a debate with that grumpy old guy. Or that silly young guy that listens to the wrong old guys. That is a big ass beetle.
Is that your arm?
That is not my arm. Who wears a wristwatch? Sorry, kid, that's weird. I like your hair, I don't like your watch.
Digital.
Oh, is it?
So it's a little less cool.
Okay, less dorky, yeah.
What is it? It's digital. Yeah. I can tell the time. Your watch was wrong yesterday. You can even know the real time.
Let's see if I can do this. Let's see if I can do this. Hey Siri, what time is it?
Hey Siri, what time is it? It's 9:52.
Okay. I was hoping somebody had their phone loud enough.
You gotta
thought it
press
was
the
voice
home button
recognition.
before
No, you don't.
Phone's on your phone, bro. Not my
You can
phone.
set up
Mine's
to
just on
Hey
silent.
Siri, except it senses your voice. It doesn't do it with other
Oh god.
All right.
I don't know.
Say, there's this magical thing called voice recognition.
People are definitely sick of this.
Okay. Here we go.
people.
Mine was silent.
Six problems.
Okay. So the trees. Okay. The trees.
Yes, indeed.
This is a simple explanation. You can all do this. You kind of gotta all do this, and you've got to take these notes. First of all, I'm going to use Mammoth Lakes because that's the one that I know best. But I'm not arguing that I have the specifically Mammoth Lake numbers for you, because I don't know that I do. All right. Mammoth Lakes, please look up, has roughly the black line average nighttime temperature low. So in the winter, the low gets below freezing. In April or so, you get the last nighttime frost. Until October or so, you get the first frost. And if I'm wrong about the dates, the example's fine, you just change elevation. So maybe I'm talking about Tom's Cabin, or maybe I'm talking about Bishop, anyway. Someplace on the Eastern Sierra, that's going to be the right calendar, okay? So I'm moving on. Next. The red line shows a little bit of climate change. This part of California is about 1.5 degrees hotter than it was about a century ago. That rate of temperature change is globally shocking. That never happens naturally. That is unnatural. That's considered extremely rapid climate change. That is comparable to volcanic eruptions and meteor strikes. That does not happen in nature. And that's not a lot of climate change, by the way. That's just what we've seen so far, the last 100 years. 1.5, okay? So you can see that I just took that black curve and I just shifted it up a little bit. 1.5 degrees is not a lot. And I don't know how you can blame China for this because all the thermometers show you that. We got that red line, that's clear. Now, I'd like to call everybody's attention to these two black lines, which were the previous last frost, first frost, but now I've moved them outward, like maybe 2 weeks earlier in April or 2 weeks later in October. And you know, like if you just keep track of snow records at Mammoth Mountain, on average 2 weeks is actually kind of pretty close to right. First frost, last frost, like everybody keeps these records, that's pretty clear. 2 weeks. That's not a lot of climate change, it's not a big whoop, 1.5 degrees, nobody's dying for 1.5 degrees, I'm fine, you're fine, 1.5 degrees, okay. Next. There's this thing called a ponderosa boring beetle. There's a bazillion beetles that do this thing. I just picked one species, but there's a bazillion species. My favorite is the alder hardwood boring beetle, but there are thousands of beetle species around the world that will fly onto a tree. They have these pictures of peril up in the front, and they go munch, 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 and they bite their way through the living phloem and xylem and get into the dead rings on the inside, and they keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging.
You need to plug your Mac in.
Uh-oh. Will you plug me in, homie? And once they reach the soft wood at the middle of the tree where it's all dead, they do this weird like 3-point turn, insert like a pointy egg depositor into the wood, they lay a bunch of eggs in the wood, and then they back out, and they fly away and they die. And those eggs will hatch in about a month, and when those eggs hatch, beetles fly out, and they go make more babies. I think it's a 4-week life cycle, so I'm off somewhere. So they lay eggs, and then 4 weeks later, the babies lay eggs. Okay? They make a bunch of eggs, so you all know that insects reproduce quickly. Does everybody raise your hand if you've seen exponential growth? You understand J-curve, exponential growth? We're okay with this concept? I really want to push you to think about these implications in a minute. So we're all good with exponential growth? Everybody got this? Now, beetles are a natural part of the forest. They've always been there. They're always going to be there. Trees can always deal with these beetles. Every single tree gets 1 or 2 holes from a beetle, and every single tree is fine because they make sap, and the sap makes scabs, and everybody's happy. Big old tree drinks, square miles of water. It doesn't give a crap about a couple beetle holes. So beetles get to eat, trees survive, just like you can deal with a scab or a little injury or a cold now and then. Dog can take a flea, no big deal. Please look up. In a normal winter, you might get like 1, 2, 3 beetle seasons. In a horrible year, maybe you get 4. And that 4th one, that makes a horrible year because exponential growth. You all understand that the majority of the growth is on the tail end? J-curve? If you go a little bit further, your line goes way up. If I went 4 weeks further, I'd be like up on that fish poster somewhere, right? Well, what if every single year we went 4 weeks further? We've basically taken maximum bee populations and raised them by 1 more breeding cycle. Now there's just a lot more beetles. On a bad year, there's crazy more beetles. Like, people find them in the grill of their cars, and they fly into your house, and every high school kid throws them at the other high school kids, and all the little kids have seen them and played with them and brought them home, and look, Mom, I found a big beetle, and by now everybody in Mammoth Lakes knows the beetle. Because every single year, there's an extra life cycle of beetles, so there's no more mellow years. Every year's a bad year, and now in a bad year, it's a really bad year for the beetles. We can add in some more bad news. Climate change for mountainous parts of the United States usually means drought. Roughly 20% drier because the jet stream is moving. So that moisture falls in a different place that doesn't normally have forest anymore. So we're getting too much snow in the eastern part of the United States because that didn't become rain in the western part of the United States. Fun fact, we're just moving where the jet stream goes. So, too many beetles, plus a little 1-2 follow-up, 20% less rain on average, means the trees are effed. They're so doomed. At Bass Lake, there's entire vistas where you can sit and not see one green tree. Entire tracts of forest in the eastern Sierras are gone. I drive through, I see it all the time. I spend a lot of time in the Sierra. I spend a lot of time in the western Sierra and the eastern Sierra. Colorado has lost something like 60% of their one species, the ponderosa pine, I think. California is the country's biggest emitter of CO2 because all those trees are dying, so all their CO2 is coming out of the trees. Even though California people are the lowest emitters in the US, California trees have made us the biggest global warming source in the country because all of our trees are dying. And you compare that to states with no trees, they are now the lowest greenhouse threat because they don't have any forest to ruin.
So clear cut.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So, are the trees still able to be used for lumber after they're killed?
Sadly, no. When they dry, they're no good. So now there's this big.
Hi, Jose.
Hi, girls. There's this big movement to allow logging companies to cut down trees that are doomed before they die. When the tip is rotten, you can tell that the rest of the tree's going to die out. So we're giving forestry companies access to national forests and say, look, you can keep that one, just cut down the others so we don't get crazy fires.
I know if you ever birthday book.